Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first ever edition of MBC Bracketology. I'm joined today by my co-host Connell, Scruggs, and analyst JP Eisenhauer and Andrew Selover.
And today we're going to take you through an in-depth look of the 4A high school playoff bracket, as well as focusing on Marist's potential matchups and some other big teams in their matchups. So, Marist is placed in the top right quadrant of the bracket as a number 2 seed in their region, and the first round matchup they're going to play Cedartown, who's a 3 seed. Cedartown's 5-5, although they're much better than their record lets on. They lost to a 10-0 Rockmart team, who's in a higher classification, I believe 6 or 7A, and they lost to Cartersville 24-2, and we know how good Cartersville is. And then their third big loss was to Sandy Creek, and they lost 34-30. And it was good of them to stick in that game because we know Sandy Creek is an extremely high-powered offense, and so it's tough to stay with them, but they stayed right with them pretty much to the end of the game. And their big win, really, was against Troup County, who's a 6-4 team, although they are also much better than their record lets on, although not as good as they were last year. They won 15-8 in a defensive battle, and that was a good win for them, although they have been struggling on offense, mostly because they lost their quarterback to a season-ending injury. He got hit in the midsection, and he had a spleen injury, so that took him out for the year, and that he's committed to Eastern Carolina, I believe, so that kind of hurt their offense. But they do have a marquee running back in Kobe Pryor. He's committed to Clemson. Only thing for that is they don't really have an offensive line to block for him, so it's tough for him to break off those big runs consistently, although he's extremely talented.
Yes, he is. All right, and now we'll head over to Andrew Selover for a potential for an in-depth look at Carver Columbus, a potential future matchup for Marist.
Thanks, Andrew. As you said, Carver Columbus, a team that Marist could match up with in the second round. They won Region 1, and only because of one game, against Cairo, a game that ultimately decided that Region 1 champion. That game was a thrilling matchup between two high-powered offenses that eventually went double overtime, and Carver Columbus pulled that one out, winning 52-46. And that's big because if Cairo had won that, Marist would have had to travel to Cairo instead, which is about 5 hours away. Instead, in the second round, if Marist and Carver Columbus can win, that'll be an exciting matchup. Carver Columbus hasn't really played too many teams because they have a large region and have to play a lot of teams in region that aren't that good. In the first week of the season, though, they did lose a game to Harris County by 2 points. Harris County is a decent 5A team, but since then, Carver Columbus has been on a roll. They've rolled over a bunch of teams in their region, except for Cairo in that thrilling double overtime matchup, and that game proves that Carver Columbus knows how to win games. Finally, they have one big wide receiver, Josias Credle, a class of 2020 player that's got a bunch of mid-level D1 college offers, especially. He's been looked at by UCF. They have a bunch of athletes on this team. It's just a matter of can they get them all playing well together. But if they can, this is a really good team and a tough opponent in the potential second-round matchup for Marist.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes, that is a huge potential matchup in the second round for Marist. And then if they move on into the quarterfinals, one of the big probable matchups they have is against Perry.
Yeah, and this Perry team should not be overlooked. They did go 6-4 in the regular season, 4-1 in the region, but their offense is no joke. Carried by junior running back Mikel Kendrick with 131 carries, 861 yards, and 8 touchdowns. That's a pretty solid running back. And on defense by senior defensive back Tyron Mobley. He has 81 total tackles, 42 solo, 3 interceptions, and 2 forced fumbles. A solid team and will put up a fight against Oconee County. Now we'll head over to JP for another potential matchup in Oconee County.
Oconee County is not a team to overlook. Led by quarterback Max Johnson. He's an effective passer, and he does not make a lot of mistakes. He's been a great player all season. At running back position, Darius Norman. He's an explosive back who has a way of finding the end zone on almost every play. He can take it the distance at any time. He's a great yard per carry average. They can score quick and get up really fast. They also have a very solid defense. They might not be able to change games with their defense, but they have a good enough defense with a powerful offense to really make a run. This is a team that Marist could see in the third round. They've outscored opponents 119-35 in the last 3 games coming into the playoffs. They have 8 sacks, 11 interceptions on the season. Their defense might not make consistent stops, but they make plays that change the game that can give more possessions to that explosive offense.
Thank you, JP. Definitely looks like it's going to be an interesting matchup up in the top right portion of the bracket, especially for Marist in that later round. And now we're going to shift our focus to the bottom right quadrant of this graphic. First thing that stands out to me is the first round matchup between Denmark and Sandy Creek, both high-powered offenses.
Yeah, very high-powered offenses. This game will be a shootout. Both defenses have not shown very much potential throughout this year. And Sandy Creek's offense is really what sticks out to me. This team went 9-1 and 5-1 in their region. The defense has showed a lot of weakness, but the offense has been able to win in these shootouts, posting 43.3 points per game. And if they want to move on, they'll have to put up these type of numbers.
Yeah, I'd definitely take the over on this game.
Yeah.
And the winner of this matchup will most likely make it to the semifinals and potentially play Marist if they were to make it that far. And JP is going to give us some more in-depth analysis on Denmark.
Denmark is definitely not a team to sleep on this year. In their second year in existence, quarterback Aaron McLaughlin has created an incredible team, really leading this offense. When you look at the receivers, Casey Gunn, Teddy Davenport, and of course Xavion Capers, they really have 3 number 1 receivers, and they're all big threats. Xavion Capers had 100 yards and a touchdown every game before that Marist game. While their offensive line is questionable and their defense has looked good at times but not consistently good, this team is definitely a threat with how many points they can put up per game. And you saw just last week a very convincing win over Flowery Branch, who has a great defense, and they're coming in off a big win, hoping to continue that momentum into the playoffs, make a run. Sandy Creek's a really tough opponent, though, so they're going to have to really shape up on the offensive line and defense if they want to make a push for the following rounds.
Thank you, JP, for that in-depth analysis. Now, the only other team I could see coming out of that bottom right quadrant is Burke County.
Yeah, they're an 8-2 team this year, but they really haven't played anyone. Their first loss of the season was to a really good Ware County team who's ranked 21st in the state by Max Preps. And the thing that stands out in that game is they only scored 10 points. And all the other games they've played, they've scored at least 30. So their team is really dependent on their offense. And then their second loss is to Baldwin, who's a 4-6 team. That's a pretty bad loss that'll stain their resume. But overall, they're an 8-2 team. They're pretty solid, and they're definitely good enough to compete with either Sandy Creek or Denmark in a good matchup. So I think that team is also in contention to come out of that quadrant.
Yeah, definitely a contender to come out of that interesting bottom right quadrant. Now moving on to the left side, another matchup that is really important is Blessed Trinity versus Troup County. Now we'll head over to Andrew Selover for a more in-depth analysis on Troup County.
Yeah, and guys, you mentioned that's a great Troup County team, really not a 4 seed in this tournament. They're really the quality of a 2 or a 3 seed. And this past week, they took on Cartersville, one of the best teams in 4A, and really competed with them, gave them a great game. That game was tied going into the 4th quarter, and there's a main reason why. Kobe Hudson, an Auburn wide receiver for Troup County, is one of the best athletes you'll see in all of Georgia. But they move him to quarterback because of how good of an athlete he is. It's kind of a Kyle Hamilton look out of the Wildcat, but he's a really good thrower as well, and he brings a very dynamic side to that offense. And when they put him at quarterback, which he is expected to be at quarterback against Blessed Trinity, that's a very dangerous offense and a very big test in the first round for Blessed Trinity.
Yeah, but that high-powered Troup offense is going to have to face an extremely physical Blessed Trinity defense. You saw it 2 weeks ago when they played Marist. They really out-physicaled Marist, and that offensive line for us, which we hadn't seen get beaten really all season, they just absolutely came and hit us in the mouth. That our offensive line has been fantastic all season, and that's going to be really important for the Blessed Trinity defense to be physical in this game. I feel like if they can out-physical Troup, they might be able to win the game pretty handedly. And on the offensive side of the ball, they have a lot of weapons, starting with quarterback Duncan Rivas. He really hadn't shown until the Marist game where he actually played really well. He's not really a passing quarterback, but he threw the ball very well versus Marist, and you saw it in overtime when he threw that 50-50 ball. It was very well placed and helped lead to their overtime win versus Marist. And as far as their running back duo, I feel like they have possibly the best running back duo in the state in Elijah Green, who's a senior UNC commit, and freshman Justice Haynes, who doesn't really look like a freshman. You could honestly mistake him in the way he runs for a junior or a senior. And then as far as the wideout position, they have weapon Carson Haroff. He's extremely athletic and can go up and get the ball. He's a junior. He's very physical, and he's also really useful on punt returns and kick returns. So they're going to need to look to use those weapons, which they have all season. And if I feel like BT executes the way they have pretty much all season except for maybe Woodward, I think they should be able to win this game.
Yeah, that could be a really important matchup on that other side of the bracket. Another team on that side of the bracket that could play a huge role is Cairo, and Andrew Selover has more on Cairo.
Yeah, guys, you mentioned Cairo, the syrup makers, by far the best 4A mascot. This is a great team. As we talked about earlier, their game with Carver Columbus decided the Region 1 championship. They lost in double OT to Carver Columbus in a heartbreaking game. But unlike Carver Columbus, they have one other big game on their schedule this year, and that was against Bainbridge. They lost 14-10 to Bainbridge, a very competitive 5A school, but Bainbridge is number 25 in all of Georgia, so that really proved how good this Cairo team is. They're led by their QB, Robert Matthew Peters. He's a great athlete, and this is an all-around solid team and could be a test for Blessed Trinity or Troup County in the second round. And if they match up with Blessed Trinity, though, that's a tough matchup for them for one big reason, and it's home field advantage. This Cairo team is on the Georgia-Florida border, so that's about a 5-hour drive for them to Blessed Trinity, and that could prove costly for them. But this is a big test in the second round for whoever wins that Blessed Trinity or Troup County matchup.
Thank you, Andrew. And as far as the top part of this side of the bracket, there's two teams you should really look out for, and it's West Lawrence and North Oconee.
Yeah, that West Lawrence team is very high-powered. They went 9-1 in the regular season, 5-0 in their region. After a strong start in Week 1, posting 53 points, that offense continued to dominate, averaging a stunning 37.3 points per game. And the defense hasn't been bad either, only allowing 10 points per game. That team has a really, really good chance to make a run. Now we will head over to JP with an update on North Oconee.
North Oconee is another really big team to watch. Coming off a bye week after they got destroyed by Oconee County, they're definitely looking for some revenge in the first round. Their signature win was against Pius. They beat them 44-0. To put that in perspective, Marist beat them 30-0. They're led by quarterback Bubba Chandler. He's an accurate passer. He's great on the deep ball, and he gets people lined up. He's really good because they'll look to the sideline to change a play, and he'll make sure everyone's in the right position and switch everyone around great. He's really a game manager, but he's great within the pocket when he has protection. The running back, Adam Waynand, is a really powerful running back, number 40. He's really not going to be outrunning you. He's going to be running over you. And he's really going to be a great player to watch. He's a really physical style of run. And another person to watch, Eli Warrington. He's a fast receiver. He's a good route runner, and he makes special teams plays.
Thank you, JP. And now we're going to shift our focus to the top left part of this bracket. Another star-studded part, complete with Woodward Academy, who's 10-0, and then a first-round matchup between Flowery Branch and Cartersville. And JP is going to take us again through some in-depth analysis of Cartersville.
Cartersville is a team that's playing for the state championship. They really have a true home field advantage, so being the first seed is going to be huge for them. It's a grass field, so teams coming to play, if it's a rainy day, it's going to be really hard, and this field's going to be really slippery. T-Webb's really improved this year. When you look at how he's performed this year, he's leaps and bounds ahead of where he was last year. He's a senior quarterback who's really come on, and he's making a lot of good passes downfield. He's making accurate throws, and he's really making the right decisions. This Cartersville team is really balanced. They have great rushing and passing. I have a great rushing and passing game. The rushing game is led by Quante Jennings Jr., the running back. He's an explosive back. He's very powerful, and he averages 86 yards per game, and he had a 98-yard run this season. They have 8 consecutive region championships, and first-year head coach Connor Foster has continued the winning spirit. They have won 57 straight regular season games, and they've only allowed 11.7 points per game, even with giving up 42 to Sandy Creek and 35 to Troup. They really have dominated all season with this 3-4 defense. They rush 3 a lot more than a normal 3-4 team would, but it usually will work. And when it doesn't, they get some plays downfield because their secondary will start to break apart, and that's the big weakness for this Cartersville team, giving up 623 yards to Sandy Creek.
Thank you, JP. That will be a very important game, Flowery Branch versus Cartersville. And now we will head to Andrew Selover, who has a more in-depth look at Flowery Branch.
Thanks, guys. And you mentioned that matchup between Flowery Branch and Cartersville. A bunch of people will think Cartersville will come in and roll. I mean, Flowery Branch, it's a competitive team. They're a very good team in 4A, although their offense has struggled after the loss of Elijah Gainey. If they had kept Elijah Gainey, I think this is definitely a top 10 team in 4A. Their quarterback, Elijah Gainey, out for the season after their scrimmage in the first week. Offensively, they scored only 17, 14, and 0 to Blessed Trinity, Denmark, and Marist, respectively. But the defense is very good. Coming off a big loss to Denmark, I'm expecting a bounce back for this team. And last week, Cartersville didn't look great against Troup, so this might be closer than a lot of people think.
Thank you, Andrew. Another really good contender in that top left is Woodward Academy.
Yeah, and I think they have the second best chance to Cartersville, in my opinion, to come out and make it to the semifinals. Woodward is 10-0 this season, but they really haven't played anyone though, other than BT, and that was a big win. They won 13-10. They were able to hold BT to 10 points, which is really tough considering their running backs. Although they were missing Elijah Green, who is their number one running back, but they were still able to hold them to 10 points. And the main thing that propelled them there was a dominant QB performance by their senior quarterback, Mike Wright, who is committed to UCF. So I think if he can continue to play good games throughout this playoff, Woodward has a good chance and they can contend with Cartersville and potentially make it to the semifinals.
Absolutely. And now that we've gone through the bracket, we will go and cut to our Final Four picks. So now we will head to JP and Andrew for their Final Four.
Thanks, guys, and it's an exciting matchups this year in the 4A bracket, and tough one to pick here. JP, who are you taking in your 4A semifinals?
Well, first we're going to start out with disagreeing. I'm going to take Sandy Creek. I'm going to say they beat Denmark first round. I'm also going to go with Marist, of course, and then I'm also going to go with Cartersville and BT on that left side.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit in that bottom right quadrant. I think Denmark comes out with the win first round and puts it in cruise control all the way to the semifinals. I think Marist has a good chance of coming out of the top right side. They got to watch out for that Oconee County team. That's a very good team out of Region 8. And then bottom left, I really like BT. I think they got some testing matchups, but I think Blessed Trinity comes out of that one. And top left, I like Woodward Academy. They really proved themselves in that Blessed Trinity game. I think that's a really exciting matchup if we get to see it between Cartersville and Woodward, but I think Woodward might prevail. Now back to Connell and Andrew, who will share with us their Final Four picks.
Thanks, guys. For my Final Four, I'm going to agree with JP here. I got Marist playing Sandy Creek in the semifinals. I think Marist has got the best chance. They're the best overall team, I think, in their part of the bracket. And then Sandy Creek's going to face a tough matchup in the first round, but I think they're going to prevail. As far as the other side, I'm going to have a rematch of last year's state championship in BT versus Cartersville. That's going to be a really, really good game, I think. But Cartersville is gonna face a tough matchup. I think Woodward, they're going to play them in the quarterfinals, but I think they're going to come out and win that game. So it's going to be Cartersville, BT, Marist, and Sandy Creek for my Final Four.
I agree with some of that. For my Final Four, I think that I'm going to go with Woodward upsetting Cartersville to play BT in the semifinals. And then on the other side, I will have Marist versus that high-powered Sandy Creek offense. And I think that wraps it up for our first ever MBC Bracketology. I'm Andrew Feeney.
And I'm Connell Scruggs.
Thank you for watching.
And make sure, if you want to hear some more about Marist's upcoming matchup versus Cedartown, some more in-depth analysis, as well as some college football, make sure to tune into the NBC podcast. It's going to be premiering on Thursday night on both Spotify and YouTube. So check that out if you want.